We'll be right back after this important word.
Oh, Joint. Ever had one? It really sets you up, especially at breakfast time. That lovely mild flavor. Gets you up quicker than anything that does. Up and away. A good Joint sends you off to a flying start. Puts you way out ahead of the rest of the crowd all day. Gives you energy to keep you going. Joints. Grab a basket and nip along to the grocer's.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the Operation Grow Show. It's season 5, episode 21. Hey. I have to do the cheesy figures as well because I finally remembered it. I'm still actually reading it. I'm cheating, but hey, don't tell anyone. So I hope everybody's doing well. Having a good Saturday. The weather's certainly improving, at least in this neck of the woods. And I hope it's doing well everywhere else. And actually, that's going to be certainly one of the topics for today's show is going to be dealing with temperature and heat and air, managing our environment now that I think at least everybody in the Northern Hemisphere has got this problem. In the Southern Hemisphere, you've got the reverse. So anyway, we'll deal with high temperatures this summer. So we'll go from there. But on that note, let's see. Raptor, how you doing, sir? How are things going?
Oh, everything's going well. Thanks for asking, Pete. Yeah, just been enjoying the weekend. It was actually my birthday a couple days ago, so had some fun there. Got to
Happy
pop open
birthday.
thank you so much. Yeah. Got to pop open a new jar of some mushies, so that was cool to get some fresh ones, and definitely had some fun. Was gonna open them up earlier in the day. And then the family starts hitting me up like, "Oh, hey, we want to see you. We want you to see the kids." I'm like, I've been wanting to see my nephews for I haven't seen them for months. So I was really excited, but I was just like, I had the jar in my hands. I'm like, So it's all good. I didn't have my microdose the day before. So I was like, well, I'll just have a really nice day. So I took like a couple grams, like just 2 grams. Was perfectly fine. It just made for a really good mood enhancer for the day. Just picked up my cake from the bakery. Just good day. There was traffic, and I was like, oh, whatever. I was smart enough to have everything for the cake just so it was a little warmer. So I kept it in an insulated bag, and everything was cool.
Nice.
After that, had dinner and got to drop the rest of the grams. So put 6 more, we're good to go, and had a good rest of the night, and just talked to the friends and everyone up into the night. And that's about it. That's the highlight. Just been picking up some new plants, what you and duckweed would call pawpaw. Picking up some papayas. Last year they got eaten up by rodents. Hopefully we might just talk a little bit more about IPM some other episode. I know this one's more focused on heat, but this year I'm setting up a barrier system like I've mentioned on other episodes, and that's just going to keep everything from going out. And it's also nice because I'll set up a shading cloth, so everything will be appropriate, and no matter where I put it, I get like 90% of the property I'm on is full sun. So it's a double-edged sword. It's great because you get full sun, you get a lot more room for choice, but it sucks because if you don't have things properly set up in the first place, you're going to burn everything. You need to have a nice balance of like cool and full sun and all that. So that's exactly what we're going to be touching on. More heat and how to deal with it. I myself am just going to be using a shade cloth for my outdoor crops. For my indoor crops, I'm actually going to, before I have tried, typically I was growing during the day. I had my lights on during the day, and I tried during the nighttime. It did not work out because I did not have the discipline to fix the light leaks that I was leaving open on my own. I was leaving the zippers open. That was on me. So I got a little further, realized I made a schedule for myself, made a strict schedule. So I was training myself to do everything properly. So now I'm running my lights I'm putting them on during the nighttime. So that's going to be my own practice. So I know many other people do the same thing, and it doesn't just help for keeping heat down. It also helps for keeping electrical bills down as well, because the way they charge is they charge less during nighttime because there's less activity. So it's less of a
Yeah,
strain.
some places certainly do that.
Yeah. And then I'll
No,
also be
absolutely.
opening up the windows during the nighttime, and I have a fan next to my window. So that's just bringing in fresh, cool air. It's cooling down everything. And yeah, I'll get into what something Bob and Ganja and I were talking about. He actually gave me a really good tip that night. I was just staying up and having a good time with everyone. We actually got a really good tip on how to evacuate heat from your home without air conditioning. So yeah, I'll talk about it a little later. Yeah, let everyone else be introduced. I believe Shipwreck and GMF are grabbing coffee, but Ganja's still here, I believe.
Yeah.
Hey, cheers, all.
Hey,
Yeah,
Gundra, how you doing?
I love this. I love this topic of just this stuff because it's so different for different size grows. So, like, I'm in 3x3, so I have a different perspective than Raptor versus Pete. Pete's got a kick-ass greenhouse outside, and he's dealing with glass and dealing with, it's a whole different. So it depends on what you got as to what what you do and how to keep it cheap. Like, I like to just, use what you got. But cool,
Yeah.
something to talk about.
I mean, you say about a glass greenhouse, dude. I mean, hey, for starters, it's chilly. And it's cheap, dude. It uses one of those auto lifters that just goes, oh, it's warm. Just opens up, which is perfect. Again, it's much better than having to go in and manually do it. And it's just when you fit in, and it's one of those gas or wax hydraulic hinges. So as it gets warmer, the wax expands and it just pushes it open.
Automatically
Works
does it.
wonder.
That's pretty sweet.
Yeah. No
Just a
electronics, nothing to fail.
mechanical lever. Yeah.
Nothing to
And
fail.
I believe there's oil in there. So as the oil gets warm, it expands
Yeah, it's
and
like a wax or something that they put in. Yeah.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
So
That's
that fills up
exactly
the
it.
space.
Awesome.
Okay. You were gonna say something, Ganja?
No, I was just saying awesome.
Yeah. I'm looking into a greenhouse myself, not for this, not for this year, most likely for next year. Probably do something simple. I might do a little, I might make one myself. I'll have to look at how much everything costs and all that, but it's definitely something I'm looking into. And I'm also looking into a separate growing area for the outside, specifically just for mushrooms like lion's mane, pink oysters, things that can handle the summer heat. So I'll be growing seasonally. That's how I deal with the heat for mushrooms. Instead of growing indoors and forcing things out, I'll possibly be doing both. I'll see how it goes because it really doesn't take that much heat for mushrooms to grow. So it's not that big of a deal. Like they don't produce a lot of heat in terms of the equipment. It's a very low powered LED. I could get away with just 100 watts, or even if I use I've seen LED rope lights being used. So that's another heat reduction. You're spreading out the heat into multiple areas and you can move the light exactly where it needs to be. So yeah. I know we were talking about LEDs being another factor to help out with heat reduction. So
Exactly.
it's just less wattage. It has a watt is heat is still heat. You could say 300 watts and 300 watts are different from LED to what CMH. That's what 315. But it's very similar. It's just, it also depends on the kind of light that's being distributed. Like IR is infrared in your light. So that's another determining factor. But the cool thing about LEDs is that the plants want it to be warmer. So that's the benefit. You don't have to blast the AC to equal out the leaf surface temperature. The leaf surface temperature that you want, is what some people might call ideal for VPD. Is 82, Some people say 84-ish, between 84 and 82, which is like around 83-ish. So yeah, I love my LEDs. They've really helped me out. Like I could still grow in the summer indoors. The reason I don't grow outdoors is you need to have everything sealed up. I don't have everything set up for that. So that's why I'm saying I would like to have a greenhouse. I can't do that this summer, but I can do it next. And it's all good. I can for sure have everything locked up, and I'll even shade things out. So no one's really going to see what's in there. They're just going to know there's a greenhouse there. My family's been known for gardening since we've been here. Like if you look outside where I live, lots of flowers, lots of vining plants, just all stuff my mom took, started buying on her own and took interest in. But yeah.
No, exactly. Hey, Shipwreck, how you doing, buddy?
Good. How about you? How about you guys?
Yeah, doing good. So enjoying this warmer weather. It's certainly pleasant.
Yeah, it's been getting
one of the
hot
only
out
other
quick here too.
Yeah, I mean, one of the only other things I have to do in the greenhouse, one of the nice things is it's got a concrete slab sort of floor or strip that runs up the middle, and you keep the humidity up in there, because that's the one thing that actually just it dry out really quickly. You just throw a couple of buckets of water down over the concrete, and it all gets soaked into concrete and then slowly evaporates back out again. So that's a handy little tip for keeping the humidity up. I mean, it doesn't last for very, very long, but it helps at least. It's like an occasional little boost there. But yeah, you're talking about the LEDs and HIDs. Hey, GMF, are you back, by the way, buddy? Sorry.
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
sir. So
How you doing,
yeah,
dude?
can't
Welcome.
complain, man. Just here, trimming things up, getting things processed, but temperature wise, I mean, I'm in an environment right now. Our high today was 91. Our low today will be about 61. And right now it's 82% humidity.
Nice.
Like this is we get some crazy temperature swings here, but this is fairly normal for here in the summertime.
Also known as unpleasant on the comfort scale.
You get used to it, but it's only a couple of months.
I mean, yeah, you were mentioning there the LEDs and HID, and yeah, LEDs are cooler, but it's that sort of false economy of are they? People forget why they're cooler. It's cooler because you're running less wattage for the same amount of light output, usable light output, and that's the bonus. You don't need 600 watts. You only need 400 watts to generate what the 600 watt light was doing. And these are very, maybe the calculations are different. These maybe even go away with a 350 watt LED can maybe perform like a 600 watt HPS. I have no idea. But when it comes to crunch time, it's less wattage, and that's really what it comes down to. And then the real other difference is how the two disperse that heat in the environment and how they move it around. So for instance, with LEDs, they're both producing the same amount of heat output, and it's a simple calculation, BTU. It's not a difficult one. So 1 point something or another, I forget what it is, or 3 point something. Hang on, I'm going to share the screen.
I think a LED, as far as heat loss, when you do efficiency equations of an HPS versus a LED, an LED is far less heat loss than, so an HPS is going to generate a ton of heat. Like it's a huge percentage, whereas with a LED, the loss to heat is like nominal. So there's way more heat transfer electrical. So not only is it using half the wattage, but LEDs in general are transfer more photons and less heat from.
Yeah, but there's still, at the end of the day, unfortunately, all of that wattage that goes in turns out. So it's also the driver for the LED. If you took like one of those wide panels, you can stick your hand on it when it's a nice wide spread out panel. I brought it all together, so it was the diameter of what that, like take a 600 watt LED and put all the diodes so they occupy the same amount of space as what a 600 watt HPS bulb is occupying, and sim
Oh
see
yeah,
your
they make
finger
they
on
make
that.
flashlights. They make
Yeah,
flashlights that you can start a fire with. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Um,
No
but it's
doubt.
also, yeah, so all the heat rises. The big difference is they don't produce infrared heat. That's the key difference, but they're still producing heat. It's just not infrared. And that's the real difference there. So I don't know why I'm trying to figure out how to get it to share the screen. Oh, there we go. So as like an example, with LED heating, all the heat just rises straight up. If you don't have any air movement, you just let it switch them on. They don't really heat anything below them. You really want to have something that would move that around, bring it down to somewhere else.
during the winter.
Yeah. And that's the
You
thing to
would want
remember.
it
That's where all
pointed
that heat's
down,
going.
like
Yeah.
a ceiling fan when you set it to summer versus winter, which
Yeah.
is nice. We can disperse the heat accordingly with the season,
And then
whether
with
you
an-
want to keep it or evacuate it.
And then when it comes to an HID line, of course, it also generates heat that goes up because that hood, that bulb, if it's totally exposed, it blasts everything. But I mean, of course, all the infrared that the bulb is generating is heating up the actual hood that's around it, whatever you're using. So that generates heat, but it also heats all of the surfaces that are exposed to it. So I don't know how well this shows up, but there you see, there it's generating heat from the ground up as well. It's not all just coming from there. And if you've got cool tubes that are busy pulling air through from one to the other, you get even less heat possibly being radiated away from them. So that's one of those like key differences. And again, why LEDs, the room feels cooler because it's not heating any of the surfaces up. If you were to stick your hand, take a thermometer and put it at the top of your tent in an LED room and see just how warm it is at the top of that tent. It's really warm up there.
Oh yeah, I have a veg tent going right now, which I just have a little 100
cheers,
watt
everyone.
LED. Oh, cheers. I just have a little 100 watt LED in there, and I can definitely say that it's hotter at the top. Where when in my flower room, I just use CMH, and yeah, I definitely have to put the fans more concentrated below compared. But yeah.
No, it's a great point. How do you deal with those heats? Since you're using a different light, how do you deal with it besides the fan? You just that's when you're typically using AC though, right?
Yeah, I got to switch over to the AC. Usually in the winter up here, like I live in Southern Ontario, so the winters are perfect. Like I don't need any AC. It's just perfect temperature and humidity, it seems. But once the summer gets, it's like, damn, it gets around 32 and then 100% humidity sometimes. Cause like I have I can see a body of water from my front step and it just gets pure. Like it's brutal. So I got to throw in the AC definitely.
Yeah. So you were gonna, I remember us talking about this before. You're looking into buying another LED and building it yourself so that you can save money and it's more affordable, but that's for your summer runs. You'll do double LED.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
veg,
Because I used to flower with two 315 CMH, and the heat it's a lot to keep up to. Like once you get going, and the temperatures get up to that point.
with the price. Oh, I was just gonna say, with the price you pay for saving on the AC and not running that, you could just run more lights and even more, another 10. So just things to keep in mind. You can you can really move up your yields and work with more if you just move things around. But you were saying, Pete.
Unlike something like cool tube, okay, so when you're trying to manage the heat in a grow room, let's say, and you're using the headlights, to HPS, CMH, etc. One of the things about all of these is that they need to be at a certain temperature. That's what causes the gases to burn to give the spectrum that you're after. So that's, and that's where those bulbs produce the infrared is in the process of heating up. Part of that spectrum that they produce is infrared, along with all the other spectrums. All of them, you know, they're all energy particles bouncing around. They're all heat and energized as they go. So one of the advantages of an LED, of course, but you can't do those things is you can't cool them down. Ideally, they need to be run at the temperature that they're supposed to run at. So if you're trying to cool the environment and you start pulling cold air through, and you then keep fluctuating this thing's temperature, it's not producing the optimal spectrum that you're interested in. Now, what you can do with LEDs, of course, is you can cool them down because it doesn't give two shits about the temperature. It's not using temperature to produce the spectrum. So now you can actually keep, if you're really running into problems, you could come up with like ways of really chilling. I mean, you could fit PTO, PTO. Fuck, I don't know pronounce it properly now. I'm butchering it. You know, chill units to the backs of these things that would bring them down to, you know, freezing, near freezing temperature. Condensation become a problem. But that's one of the advantages. And in doing so, you would actually extend the life of the device because it's more on the electronic side than that you're interested in. So yeah, you can cool them and not mess with the spectrum. Something you do have to be aware. I mean, I say yeah, you got to be aware. I don't know if anybody here ever had that as a problem, where they've noticed that they were chilling their HPS bulbs or head bulbs to that extent that they messed with the spectrum. Anybody in chat ever had that? Yeah, definitely. I mean, that one that Chad is mentioning in chat there about dimming them and running them at a lower wattage because then they run at a lower temperature. Absolutely. Now that, you know, that's an obvious one that you can see, but I don't know if I've ever had anybody had that problem with a cool tube. Maybe if you were, Jesus, you'd have to be pulling like Canadian winter air through there.
Make the bulb shatter.
I think that's another thing you just hit on right there, Shippy, is temperature differential. You know, there's one thing having high temps or low temps. It's another is that big swing in temperature. You know, it's a weird thing here. I can get a 30-degree swing in temperature in a single day in summertime. I don't know how typical that is for, say, you know, the UK or somewhere like that, but I think for a lot of times that's what causes a lot of danger to us is that rapid flux from you could be, you know, warm and 82% humidity, and then now it suddenly drops, you know, 30 some degrees while it's cooling down at night. Now that can be really rough on your outdoor. So even on your indoor. So I think that's what also makes, like we've talked about this before, your heat shape and the, you know, the airflow shape all the more important. So, you know, if using an LED, it does help by, you know, you do your overhead extraction, even in 82% humidity, I can pull enough air from bottom to top that I'm not giving any of those things a chance to really make the microclimate necessary for sporulation.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly.
So you can fight humidity and hot temps and all that stuff and temp swings, but your best weapon typically is then overclocking or having, you know, really, really supremely dialed in airflow.
Yeah.
But that's a good point too, GMF, just airflow. How do we fight these temps? Like you were just mentioning, Pete, like that everything, yeah, that heat's going up and then you have to fight it with this really cool air and then it's just never really in equilibrium. So you were mentioning just constant airflow can really make or break everything. And
well,
yeah,
and here 91
for it.
degrees out at 82% humidity, is turning on dehumidifier really going to bring my temps down? You know, yeah, I could dehumidify the 82% air, but it's really, so you either got to crank on the AC or you've got to really, and I don't like to really run my AC if I can avoid it as much, you know, now certain times of year you have to, but you know, really, I think it's that airflow that makes us more comfortable and makes the plant more comfortable too.
Yeah.
Even in these ridiculous temps.
Oh, absolutely. And that's definitely one of those things that just that airflow, even if you can't cool it down much, just that the simple fact that you've got the airflow going makes a huge difference in its ability to handle the stress from the plants. You know, for
Well,
the
yeah,
plants, well,
you're
able
allowing
to
the
heat
plants to
the
breathe.
heat.
You're letting exchange go. Like it's more constant exchange instead of just like it's sitting there. Yeah, I can always think back to my first grow, like, oh, I don't. Do I really need an exhaust fan? We'll see. Yeah, you do. A nice, big, strong one. I'll tell you. So yeah, I got a 6-inch can fan, just going constantly on the lowest setting possible, and there's the walls are just breathing in at all times. So I like keeping the Scrog frame up actually. I have everything out, the Scrog's out, but the frame's still there, and it keeps it from going in all the way. So yeah, it's how I find that all the plants are just fine. And I still most likely need another fan in there at canopy level or just around there to be blowing upward. Well, actually,
As I said, I found
downward.
those
Huh?
on I'll send you the link. I mean, on Amazon, I found those PC style fans. I mean, they're essentially they're server rack fans. So they run off mains. They don't run off 12 volts. They run off 110 or 240 volts. So you can just run them straight off the mains. But that's also the bonus because you can just run them mains and then run like 5 of these things off one mains supply because they're drawing like 2 amps or even not even that, man.
Yeah, and you can probably do them at different levels too.
Yeah, so you can string them up. The other thing that's cool is here's a little tip. If you want to find something to mount all of those into, look again at the server rack mounts because they already have all of that shit. They've already thought of these problems. Is like, how do they mount fans in racks that generate a lot of heat? You know, these servers in these racks are pumping out 500-600 watts plus, if not more. You know, actually quite a bit more than 200. You know, so they've got some really cool little solutions to tight space airflow solutions. Rather than having loose fans hanging and swinging all over the place, you can have them on these neat because they've got these plates. So they've already got all the holes drilled. It's all nicely spaced
Yeah, you can
out.
mount
You
them.
just mount
They're
them on.
basically on a mount already, and you just have to make sure that they're secure. They're already on a frame. You can handle them.
They give you the frames. That's the nice thing. It's all pre-drilled and they're dirt cheap because they're mass produced for the server market.
Yeah, it's funny how many things we get from the technical side of computers. You know, just think about the heat sinks. Like my heat sinks on my chip on boards, I have like last gen tech for LEDs for my flowering tent. And yeah, I just have 90 pin heat sinks on there. Guess where that came from? That engineering came from.
I'm surprised people haven't really gone into the air like liquid cooled heat sinks on LEDs.
I've only
Well,
seen
I've done
them
the
on
HLG
built.
Diablos with silver paste, and then double drived them. So I did 1200 watts on a Slate 5 with silver pasted Diablo boards. That's just overkill, man. You're wasting so much. But
I mean, if you could take a water cool block, I mean, is that what you do? Is that how you?
You don't even need to water cool it. So with the LEDs, I ran a 600 watt fixture at double. So at 1200, I added a 600 watt. I added an extra 600 watt, and then I did was silver pasted the boards, the quantum boards, onto the heatsink. So there was no, the silver paste basically makes the heat transfer onto the Slate 5, which is a beefy, badass 30-pound heatsink. It makes it much quicker, much better than tape, much better than anything. And I didn't need any liquid cooling, but yeah, that was even too much. It's just overkill. It can be done, but it's stupid.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just thinking because you see, the reason why I'm thinking about the PC cooling side of thing, like with the radiator, and certainly for the cobs, you could just clip a PC, you could take a 350 watt cob and just clip one of these.
Yeah.
It's one little thing, and you run it off to a radiator cooling system.
Right.
It's pumping liquid around, keeping this thing really nice and chill. And the whole thing is, it's about removing all that headroom space. To catch with like passive heat sinks is they need a lot of space for air to flow through them to dissipate all this heat to. They can't
Yeah, and
be
they're heavy and
small little
cumbersome.
things.
Yeah.
So if you can figure out a way of removing that now, if you really want to make your LED not heat the room up, is you dump all the heat that LED is producing
Out of the
outside
room.
of the room using
Yeah.
a radiator. Just dump it all out there. That's the way you do it, or just off the roof. So you have them all coming through the top of your tent. You just have the radiators sitting outside the tent. All right then.
Actually, speaking of roofs,
Kickstarter.com.
Ganja, do you remember what we were talking with Bob actually the other night? We were talking about like this one fan unit that goes up in your attic and it
Yeah,
exhausts
so you
the
have
heat.
you'd have an attic fan, just a fan, usually a fan from your top story into your attic. A big, called a whole house fan. Basically sucks all the air out of the house into your attic. Granted, you have to have an attic, number one,
Hmm.
to
Yeah.
blow into, and then you do electric vents. You do electric fans at the gabled ends of your attic to blow all that outside, and then all of your indoor grow tents should be, basically just use that attic as where they vent into, and then just escape it out of there. But yeah, you could basically dump the heat out of your entire house, in a matter of 2 minutes with that
Mhm.
right fan. And that's the same principle as you need, like where I'm in a 3x3. My fans are always vented out of the very top of my tents, and my intakes are at the very bottom. And then I use
Same.
I do 3x3, so I take a tower fan, and because all of the intakes out of the top are in one corner, I have a tower fan strapped to the roof in the other corner, not all the way to the roof, but so it makes that, circulation between the intake sucking it up, and that pushes air down in the front. And that basically is, my airflow. Plus, I have another fan blowing at mid canopy, but not using that, that's the biggest thing is where are your fans? What are you using for fans? Like you have a can fan Raptor, which is a great fan. That style of fan doesn't fail as often as the shitty ass fans. And
No, it's been going strong for
yeah,
like 3
AC
years.
Infinity is another good one just because it uses very little electricity, but it doesn't
Yeah,
have the nice.
that's my next one. That's my next
Yeah.
buy actually.
Okay, so this is so an example of just cool air coming into a room. No air movement, just let it passively just flow into the room. I think it's being pushed in at like 2 meters a second. That's the velocity it comes into the room at, and it just flops down and just casually spreads out. So that's if you're not doing
this is
anything
awesome.
in the space,
Mm.
this is pretty much what's going on. You're not mixing it up, you're not stirring it around, you're just leaving it as it is. Then we put in as it is air 2 degrees cooler. So there's one fan, this little blob over here as a fan that's then just oscillating from side to side. And you can see how, if the fan's on the other side of the room, part of the problem from where the source is does that cool air make it to the side of the room where you're trying to get it to as well? If the fan's blowing all the cool air towards the source of the cool air doesn't make it to where the fan is. It's constantly being blown back that way. So just simple things to try and, to consider is that where's my air intake? And therefore think about where you're going to have to point various things. So, okay, so this is cool air coming in at floor height rather than from high up and dropping down. It's the same, it just moves along the floor instead, obviously. Okay. But and again, this is just a room with nothing in it. So room with nothing in it, yay, and it'll flows up the wall on the other side because it's got movement. It's got a bit of momentum as it gets going. Oddly enough, it does actually have mass. The air does. That's the. I was like, hey, what? So that cool air coming in down the bottom now, but now you've got pots in the way. And we don't have any fans blowing anything. You've put some plant pots in. That same cool air coming in. And you can see how the obstacles in the way start to quite significantly change the flow of the air around the space. And that's when that's the pots now. So you can imagine how you put plants in here. The plants start off small and the plants get bigger and bigger and bigger. That starts to mess with the airflow more and more and more. So you really do need to consider where you put, where things are going. Keep an eye on it. Regularly check the airflow. Move your thermometers around and look at it in different places at different stages of the
Yeah.
growth. And
Your
yeah, it's good-
position of your exhaust is very important. Or your,
Yeah.
your intake and exhaust are both very important. So like, pay attention where they are. And just like Pete was saying, position them accordingly.
On
and
a,
this
on
has
a
got
3 foot
two
by 3
fans on
foot
the
tent,
wall. Yeah.
yeah, with a bottom intake, usually you're going to want to do something to pull and distribute to the other side. So I'll even use a tower fan pointing into the opposite corner, oscillating and bouncing it off that wall just to pull it across the entirety of the tent.
And here's something that's really interesting. I don't know how well it's showing up. But okay, if you've got a fan against the wall, okay, and you've got it blowing away from the wall, it's got to get air from somewhere, because otherwise it's creating this massive vacuum behind it, which it can't
Mhm.
have. So it's got to draw all this air in from somewhere. And what you notice actually happens here is the air is being stuck like straight along the floor at this part and up the wall as a result of these fans trying to pull air away from the wall. And the model knows that there's a solid wall here. So it's kind of creeping up, and you actually notice it starts to just go in a vortex. As soon as it gets away from the fan, it just whips and comes straight back again because the fan is just creating this vacuum. I need to run, I just placed it again. Run it for long. And so you just get the circle happening. The air isn't actually going really anywhere because the fan is too close to the wall
Mhm.
to be able to get enough air to flow in from elsewhere behind it. So that's something else to really think about in positioning the fans around the place. Mm.
Yeah, it definitely makes me want to reconsider adding, well, with my 3x3, there's not much room for the right fans. The one fan I bought was way too big. So I just need to, I'm actually glad you mentioned those server fans as well, because I'm sure I could work within that could work within my space. Also too, just I've seen smaller fans that just go off like 30 watts, 50 watts, and have that on the floor. You know, now that it's summer, be moving the cool air upward, and making sure it's also pointed at the canopy.
Yeah, and upward flowing air also has the advantage of not letting things settle on the leaves and on the plant. So if you've got this constant sort of updraft, yeah, it's again one of these tricks borrowed from normal greenhouse growing of tomatoes, and that where they have the hot pipes running between all the rows, and it just keeps this constant warm air draft running up, and just keeps everything going up to all the molds and etc.
Yeah, nothing's gonna take hold. It's just going up. Yeah, I know that a friend I actually met from the DGC that also grows mushrooms. He gave me a good tip with how he would get rid of a lot of the floating contaminants in the air.
Yeah, it's fine.
Would just be
Just waiting.
Hey,
hot mic.
GMF, hold on. Yeah.
Sorry about that, guys.
You're good, dude. But yeah, he would take a spray bottle, just fill it with water, and then just put one drop of soap. So I would use a soap like Dr. Bronner's. So it just make me feel better. But yeah, and by spraying that in a fine mist in the air, you're actually going to bring down everything. So you're working with the physics of just like, hey, there's nothing in the air now. So you have like technically 15 minutes, he said, until you would have to spray again. And there's stuff in the air that you would like bring down. So just these little tricks of knowing how things work, and if you just pay attention to the little details. That just reminded me of it, of like all the things we're talking about. Like
Yeah. I think it's saying, what effect would you get if the fan was blowing straight down from the center of the room? You see, this is a really interesting thing. It's actually, it's like measuring the effective distance of the fan. We don't pay that much attention to it. I don't think. I mean, it's just like you make these assumptions. There's no fault of it. You make it, so I'll put the fan over there, it blows air that way, great. But if you actually like measure how far does it blow, and you suddenly realize when you're 4 or 5 feet away from the fan, you can't feel it anymore. It's dispersed so much that it has very little impact. For instance, Magma mentioned air socks. Those are great, and there's a good way of dispersing air with little holes in them, and you can run them. And the nice thing is they're soft and bouncy, so you can stand on the damn thing. You can just put them on the floor. You really want something that's producing like this real even airflow across the whole thing. Definitely for fans further away from the wall, you want them away so they've got space, again, to be able to pull in that fresh air behind it, and not just pull it straight back as soon as it gets going.
Also, I like to take that oscillating fan and point it into literally a corner, so it oscillates off those walls. Hopefully, I think we ran a model of that, Pete. That was one of the first ones you showed me, was a model of that.
that was really
And
cool.
ever since then, I've been sticking with it, just because it seems to get a good temperature dispersal, so I can really normalize things. When I take a nice P&L grow sensor and I've moved it around, I tend to get a very, very consistent, regardless of where it's at in the tent.
Yeah.
So,
And that's going to be all about tent size too. Like smaller tents is just, you're just so limited, It's the way
well,
you
and a
do.
3
But I
by
do
3 or
love those
4 by
tower
4, so
tower
much
That's
easier
for
to
sure.
control. Yeah.
Yeah.
That 3 by 3 or 4 by 4 footprint is so much easier when it comes down to just how many cubic feet you need to push through there to completely exchange it. It's almost easier to run 2 3 by 3s than a 3 by 6, simply because you can force exchange through that narrow opening at the bottom or top and actually create far more vacuum power than you normally would have.
Yeah, I think I've found some more.
Actually, go ahead, Gondry.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, if you have with a 3 by 3, honestly, if you have a really good intake fan and a really good exhaust fan, ducted right, no elbows, straight shot, and you're getting great CFM readings on intake and outtake, you know what you're doing. That's all you need. Seriously,
You don't even need AC.
You don't
just
need
need a good
anything.
design. Good
yeah,
design
if
and
you have
moving
it
things
designed
in the
right,
right place.
that's all you need.
Yeah.
So you,
This is,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah,
Pete.
this is like with an LED light and just passive cool air just coming in, and then you're sitting here, you're waiting for them to mix. So that has no fan involved. I mean, so if you don't have any fan, it's it's less than ideal. And then if you were to move the cool air higher up, you just had it passively just coming in higher up. All it does is just drops. It'll pull. You can see it starts to pull the warm air down with it, but not that much.
I love these models because you can see the literal physics. Like you can't deny heat rises, cool air sinks. And you can use that model in moving the air with just like one fan. Like always
In
love
this one,
watching all these models.
There's a fan in the corner. I don't know how well you can see it, but there's a fan in the corner here. Probably be blowing left.
See
to
the
right.
outline. Yeah.
So this is implying kind of that this,
And you can see how it starts to create a vortex.
Vortex.
You've got it sitting facing one direction constantly.
Oh.
It's not moving backwards and forwards. So it's just facing in one direction, and it then starts to generate a vortex. And it takes a little while. And then if you did it with 2 fans, as one would sort of expect, it just speeds that process up. So there's another one, I forget what's on the side, but now you'll just see it just gets going a whole lot quicker.
So
And
the
it
cooling
mixes
coming in,
the-
is that being pumped in by a fan, or is that just passive intake?
That was
Could be
on like
either.
a passive intake. It was just
Yeah, it looks like the flow is
dribbling
passive.
in. Yeah,
Yep.
it was just dribbling in. There's no extraction in that space. It's just
Yep.
I said like just cool air coming in.
Okay.
So now, what is the
passively coming in.
simulation when now you take that to a fan that does 300 CFM? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, to have it being pulled out all at the same time. Yeah.
yeah, and then you've got the same at the top. Now you've got so the two zones that you really have to focus on are the ceiling and the floor, right? I mean, that's the exchanges that need to happen. So, urgently.
Yeah. And where you can bring in, all the different, just different ways of managing it. One of the great things to use a joystick for is walk around your grow room with one and then watch and see where it blows. You go, okay, it's not doing anything. You go, okay, get a fan in here. We need to have something moving this air around. That's definitely a handy little trick with those. And
Yeah.
then ways of dealing with the heat. I mean, okay, so what do you do now? It's hot. What are you going to do? Or what are people's tips and tricks?
Yeah, like I mentioned before, I use LEDs. I have a constant airflow, although it is on low for the can fan, because it's a constant airflow. It's constant air exchange. There's isn't going to be, like Pete mentioned before, with the tomato greenhouse and how they use airflow, which is constantly going. So that's another IPM trick. So just make sure if you to have constant airflow. That's where I got botrytis on my first grow. So because I didn't have anything, you're gonna make an environment for it. Yeah, that, and gosh, I just exhaust the air during the nighttime. And now that actually we mentioned the attic fan, I'm really considering that. I just wanted to mention that because I had no idea something like that existed. That it makes perfect sense that it does. When I look up at my attic, it even has ventilation that goes outward, so for passive air. So I need to look at how my exhaust is in my house, and that's another tool. Anyone else? I hope you look into that as well. Yeah, definitely a lot to do and upkeep.
I have three things that I basically look at when temperature is the issue. And this basically covers any scenarios I typically run into, or most people that I've helped out typically run into. Obviously, the one we're talking about right now is 91 degrees out. It just started raining. So obviously we hit 100% humidity. That's just airflow, more airflow, and some airflow after that. I usually, in a 3x3 tent, I will literally clock well over 300 cubic feet per minute. I have to at night keep a vent open, even though the light's covered on the bottom. I keep part of it just so it will pull in that hard. I don't want to stress the zippers that much. So I even leave cracks at the bottom of the Gorilla just to get more airflow into it. But there's two other tricks that I will often go to for heat management. And these tend to come up really when something breaks or when there's a power outage. So here, obviously, in this kind of environment, should I have a power outage? Should I lose central air? Should I lose, the ability to run extraction fans, all that stuff? The most important thing, if I can't actually keep things cool enough, I will just go on an extended dark cycle. Literally, the plant won't really suffer that much. If you have, say, a power outage, you can't get any kind of airflow, just leave them in the dark. Don't keep the light to an absolute minimum. And you can actually leave them for a few days if necessary, and they really won't show too much of an effect as far as, power outages are concerned. I've gone as far as a week of dark time and then right back to the flowering cycle, and they seem to do okay. The other one that I will use, and I've had to do this outdoors a whole bunch, especially in heat waves, is your water temperatures. The plant can handle an extremely high environmental temperature if you can cool down its root zone. And the easiest way to do that is by applying very, very cold water. Not so cold that you're killing or shocking anything, but literally drop it down about as low as you can possibly go. Especially in a hot environment, it's going to heat up that much faster. You're going to actually make the microlife much happier in that, long run. And the plant's going to be able to deal with that exterior above ground temperature much better. And I've gone so far as even just throwing bags of ice around the base of plants and letting it melt in.
Yeah,
Or old ice sculptures, like ones that we were practicing on in school. Take the chunks of the ice sculptures home and throw them on there.
Yeah. I mean, now, of course, the other thing you've got to play with is your VP. I mean, okay, so like this is where VPD is handy. Airflow is everything. I mean, this I think is the key ingredient, and we're trying to hammer home possibly is airflow, airflow, airflow. The more you can manage that, the better. So having fans, when it's really hot, have fans blowing all over the place, because you really don't want little hot, humid areas. And the reason being is because it's so warm. And if it gets really humid, which it can get up to like 80%, 85%, 90% humidity, the catch is if the temperature just drops ever so slightly, bang, you hit dew point temperature, and suddenly you'll get condensation. And that's really the catch. And that's why you want the air to be good airflow, so that prevents any condensation that forms ideally gets evaporated as quickly as possible by having more airflow over it. I mean, that's essentially what you're trying to do, keep things dry. So, I mean, I know this is in Celsius proper temperatures, so you just have to bear with me. But, if you look at the green zone on this, obviously as you get lower down, it's a broader spectrum. But as the temperatures start to climb, you can still maintain it 35 degrees. If you crank the humidity up to 80, 85% humidity, actually you could run 80% humidity at 36 degrees Celsius. Yeah, you could run that fine, so long as you've got good airflow. I mean, there are people growing in places like Florida where it's 90% plus humidity and easily that warm. And it's outdoor growing. You've got no choice, and it works, so it can be done. But the key is at those sort of temperatures and humidity, lots and lots and lots of airflow. And you don't want the temperature to suddenly tank. You want to gradually bring the temperature back down again. When you can, unless you can, of course, dump the humidity with it at the same time. If you can't dump the humidity, then that's not such a good idea. And I know I keep talking about dew point. So just to go on a graph. Yeah, the dew point temperature is the pink line. And essentially what it's saying that there where the ambient temperature is 24 degrees and a relative humidity of 65 degrees, 65% humidity. If the temperature was to drop there and then to 17.4 degrees Celsius, the relative humidity would hit 100%. If you took that air and didn't add any more moisture or take any moisture away from it and just drop the temperature, the relative humidity would hit 100% at 17 degrees Celsius. So your leaf temperature is when everything is churning along and going along happily is about 2 degrees cooler than the ambient air temperature. So bear that in mind again. So you think, well, I would always keep ambient air temperature minimum of, you're really skating it close when you say like 4 degrees away from dew point, because that's pretty tight. But you probably want a bit of wiggle room. You want to always be about 5 degrees away from it, Celsius, to try and avoid condensation forming, accidentally tripping it. And as you go down the height in your space, the temperature will drop quite significantly. And it is warmer, more humid air higher up. But again, so be careful about blowing too much warm air down. You kind of blow it all the way to the bottom, not through the canopy. Blow it into the bottom and let it rise back up through.
That would
Well, and
be
also,
in our episode dealing with cooling temps.
yeah. And it
Mm.
bears us to keep in mind where the plant is actually respirating from. You know, I've seen this so many times where people have a fan blowing at, at the actual stem level or something like that, and not through the canopy area. And that ultimately it's always going to be that leaf surface that's laying against your tent, that leaf that's laying on top of another leaf. That's going to create the microclimate that's going to cause problems. If you ever want to see it happen sometime, let your lights come on and kind of leave your tent all nice and shut up without any airflow. Just shut your airflow off for a little bit, and really quickly, any leaf that's touching the side of your tent, you'll feel water underneath it. You'll literally be able to feel the water on the sides of your tent. And that's just a good indication of how much it's actually respirating and why that airflow is so important. Don't do that long term, obviously, but if you're ever interested to just see what kind of physical manifestation of respiration your plant's actually going through, just shut your tent, leave the light on, and cut your airflow. Wait a little bit, and then feel the inside of the tent, and you will feel the moisture from where every leaf just sweated right onto it.
Oh yeah,
Within
yeah,
like 5-10 minutes that pops up, right? It's
yeah.
just like
Mm,
Jennifer was
mm.
saying, you don't have to wait very long at all. The response from the plant is immediate. It's a living thing. I actually like what GMF tries to teach a lot of new people at the very beginning. Hey, you are taking care of a living thing. You need
It's
to
more like a
think
pet
like
than a
it.
plant. You got to nurture something that can't
It's
talk.
more like let's say a pet than a plant. I mean, not many pets you kill it 12 weeks. Like, thanks, buddy. You were so good.
Yeah.
Nice chickens, cows, and pigs. Yeah.
No, but the level of responsibility, making sure, feeding schedules are on, light schedules are on. It's more responsibility than most people would ever take with a quote unquote house plant. And that's how I try to get it through to people.
Oh,
You're
yeah,
going to
yeah.
nurture something that can't tell you what's wrong. So get used to learning how to be a nurturing character if you're not. Get used to getting in touch with your soft side.
Yeah, I mean, ways of cooling the place down is to use things like, so you got problem with all this heat coming in. So ways of cooling, if it's like dump air out, vent air as fast as you can. Of course, only if the outside temperature is less than the inside temperature. So sometimes it's a bit handy to monitor both. If outside is warmer than inside, then you don't want to be pulling outside air in, or at least you want to just crank everything down to the bare minimum. On that one. Same goes with humidity. I mean, that's another catch, And so again, understand that difference. Like as the temperature changes, the relative humidity changes. So if I'm bringing warm, humid air from outside into the tent, and the tent or the grow space is cooler, that warm, it's very different 30-degree air at 80% humidity to in the middle of winter, it's 5 degrees and 90% humid. Because the second you warm that 90% 5-degree air up to 30 degrees, it's like 5% humidity. It's not the same. So that's something else to bear in mind when you're bringing this air in from outside, that temperature difference. Keep an eye on the lower part of your grow space where the air is coming in for condensation and mold and different things like that forming.
Yeah, it's almost like two different, for most people, it's almost like two different managements. You have a summer management, which is totally different than your winter management. And just like the water, like my water is totally different summer to winter. They treat it differently. I've got to adjust my grow for my water, and I have to adjust my grow for the season. Like once it gets to summertime, now I got to deal with the cooling, and it's totally different, So dialing them both in is key to, kind of really, knowing what you're doing for both. It's different. You just can't go the same way all year round.
Definitely with you there, man. Like summer and winter, completely different worlds for me.
Yeah, I've got friends that don't even bother for like the 3 hottest months. They don't even bother growing because they're like, fuck that. That's my downtime. I'm not going to deal
Last
with
year
it.
I
It's
did
too much of
that.
a pain in the ass. I'll just start, September, I'll back up and
Yeah.
running and focus on outdoor growing.
Well,
But
there,
isn't that also the advantage of being, growing in your comfortable living space, right? So if you're living at a temperature that's comfortable for the plant and you're drawing your air out of that environment, you should be able to technically grow all year long. I change absolutely nothing throughout the year simply because I'm always pulling that kind of stupid airflow, whether it's winter or summer, I don't care. I'm doing the same because it's either cold in there and I'm trying to pull in warm air, or it's warm in there and I'm trying to pull in cold air.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it depends on where you're at. So for me, we have super crazy dry for the winter and super crazy humid in the summer. So it's like
Yeah.
so drastically different that it requires a whole different, approach.
Okay.
Same
I mean,
here. Super dry in
that's
the winter, super humid in the summer, but I just make the plants deal. That or they don't get to live.
Yeah, or you spend a lot of money on AC, dehumidification, different solutions.
one thing that I thought about, it didn't really occur to me till like 15 minutes ago, was for a solution, because I'm the opposite of GMF. I'm dry in the summer and humid in the winter, so I could take advantage of that environment where I live, and I could use a swamp cooler, and that's relatively simple to make if I really wanted to, but I'd rather just well, I need to compare how much time it would take to make it versus just buying one. But yeah, if anyone lives in a dry climate during the summer, please consider that. It's much more cheaper than AC, and you're gonna bring down the temperature with like I think it's 20 degrees Fahrenheit is
Yeah, I
the
did the
drop.
swamp cooler and I thought I was all smart. I got the UVC lights in there to keep any microbes from forming or
But
keep the algae down. And then it ruined the plastic and the plastic burst within like a year and I ended up with fucking water everywhere. So watch out. There's always factors, there's always the unknown.
yeah, when you're adding things, you're definitely gonna add issues as well. So be aware of that. If you're putting in new equipment, just like Ganja was saying, with keep up with the upkeep. Make sure you're in that case with the swamp cooler, changing out the water. So before it gets acrid and everything like that develops a lot of microbial pathogens
just
in it.
touched a really good point there. But now your water reservoir, now the temperatures are warming up. Now you have to start
cooler. Yeah.
You've got to start aerating it now. If you weren't
That's a good
aerating it
point.
beforehand,
I know someone who does that very
either
thing. Yeah.
keep topping it up with a little bit of liquid oxygen, some hydrogen peroxide on the regular, just to keep the O2 levels up and kill everything off.
Or just run an air stone through it.
Yeah,
And
good
if you
point,
do
man.
run an air snow through it, keep an eye on the pH, especially if you use supplemental CO2 and you have your air pump anywhere near your grow space, because you'll drop the pH. You'll make it really acidic.
Yeah.
You're making
You'll
carbonic
make-
acid.
What they used to call vital water, which was originally, I guess, one of the reasons they thought it was useful is because they could put it on British ships and it would keep longer because it'll keep microbes out by having that small amount of carbonic acid being, CO2 dissolved into it. So that vital water, as they called it back in the day, was one of the first things that the British Navy tried, aside from rum, to keep people hydrated on long trips.
Yeah. A real thing.
But that's why carbonated water will keep for quite a while, actually, simply because that carbonic acid is hostile to most microbes, even in small, minute amounts. Their little cell walls don't like that.
Yeah. It's often a lot clearer. Like a bottle of it will seem to look clearer than an to do with the acidity. Who knows? Hey, whatever. I'm just making shit up as I go along now. Say it with confidence.
Well, no, but I think that's a big part of it right there. Like the other way to control temperature is not by controlling your air, but by controlling your water. If you can chill your reservoir, you can get your reservoir onto concrete. If you can even bring water in that's, just at a cooler temperature from the ground, you can do yourself, your plant can handle crazy heat waves as long as its root zone is cool.
Yeah, I don't know if I go to the ice water realm of you though, GMF. 68 degrees, maybe 66 degrees is about as low as I go for temperature in the root zone until late in flower when if I want to get that response, maybe I'll do ice water, but
When we would have heat waves doing outdoor plants, we would pack in bags of ice and then we would dump them or throw chunks from the ice carving station. Like I said, we'd take the chunks old chunks of ice carving.
do they
We'd take
purple
them
up?
out there. Well, honestly, they would just melt in the sun and then slowly trickle into the ground just at really cold temperatures. So
Yeah.
by having a big enough container, it never bothered them, but it just kept their constant influx of water very, very cold.
Yeah, that's true. I'm
Same
in
thing-
little 3 gallons.
Right.
I would
Well,
think
but
of
with-
it like a cool pack after walking in from a
Mhm.
hot day. You're
Yeah.
just like,
Yeah, outdoors, you got so much soil to deal with. You can.
Well,
probably
the other
boil
side of
up.
it too is in a heat wave here, when we had power go out and I had to keep my plants doing all right, and the house was getting 100 some degrees, the little self-watering containers I use, right? You can just put ice cubes in the bottom of that, and as they melt, that water will stay very, very cold. But the roots will just, being just a water root, they're not really bothered by it. They don't care. So, that water will be just above freezing temperature by the time they get a hold of it. And that really seems to do them quite well as well. So I'll literally put them in the bottom of that self-watering container, just let them melt in.
Mm, mm, mm. Question from Dozer, what temperature do you want to be at in Celsius? Optimal is between like 18 and 20 degrees Celsius. 18 to 22 degrees Celsius is kind of optimal. When you sort of get above that temperature, and again, now when you get above 22, you have to really start to think about above 25, you need to be aerating it. Otherwise, it's really going to get a bit ugly. So keeping it in that range, it keeps a root zone and optimally that temperature as well. That's a handy tip. If you dump your
interesting.
waterproof temperature probe into your root zone and monitor the temperature, when the root zone temperature gets to being the same as the ambient air temperature, it's dry as a motherfucker. Time to water it.
We had Chad Westport actually commenting frozen water in a bottle, let it melt in the reservoir, and it would sink to the bottom. So that'd be pretty good. Yeah, not a bad idea. And just buy like 3 of those, or sorry, have 3 bottles set up so you can exchange it as necessary. And then, make sure to check up on it once in the morning, once at night, do what needs to be done. Yeah. Great idea. Have to try that one myself, because I can't do what GMF mentioned by putting my reservoir on the floor. It uses it's a gravity feed system, so I actually have to have it higher. So I have to use another method than that. Even though it's a perfectly valid method, it just doesn't work with my system.
I've done that for a cloner before, put in little frozen bottles just to let them, keep the temperatures down when a submersible pump kept trying to raise them. It works. You just got to exchange them.
Yeah. It's the same thing with having a hot water bottle. You can have that as a, what am I trying to say? Like an incubator. I've seen that for making miso and doing ferments, like in order to keep the temperatures up when people didn't have, electrical help and components to help out with those things. So yeah, but the same
So
thing.
mechanical seedling mat warmer, just hot water bottle.
Yep. Old school tech coming back again in a different way.
Ian raising a question: has anyone ever tried using an infrared thermometer to check the soil temp to tell them when to water? The catch with that is it's only going to pick up the real top layer. And I think if you're using like a sip system, that should keep the whole thing constantly moist because it's bottom feeding the whole time. Then by the time that if the surface dries out and suddenly the temperature tanks, well, no, spikes, then yeah. But I think in other ones where you're watering from the top down, I don't know. I'm just wondering that top layer bakes. I've noticed just how warm it does get. You push a temperature probe into that and just watch how when the lights come on, you'll be surprised how the top layer really warms up quite significantly. I think you'd need to push it down a little bit deeper, and that's my only thing about the infrared ones is they're just measuring the very surface layer, and you might want to go
Yeah.
down just a little bit more.
I use an infrared when I brew, but part of the trick to that is you have to, if you're going to take a measurement on a vessel full of liquid, you have to agitate the liquid while you take the measurement, so the surface temperature is constantly normalizing. You know, because it's only going to reflect off that liquid surface or the side of the kettle. So if you're going to take the liquid temperature from inside, you have to actually make sure it's being agitated when you do. Otherwise, you're just going to get, you know, a big difference between the top and bottom of that heating vessel.
I'm just reading through the chat
No,
comments here.
I'll say the same thing is true in the restaurant industry. When you're going and taking your cooler temperatures to verify temps, you don't just want to hit one part of the cooler. You want to check, you know, the floor, the walls, the ceiling to see, are you getting hot spots somewhere? Because that in and of itself, you may have a temp that looks, you know, cooler that looks like it's holding temp, but if it's got an airflow problem, you're going to have consistent spoilage.
And it's amazing just how important it actually is. And again, everybody will talk lights, nutrients, boom, 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 and cut out all like the basic stuff. That'll catch a beginner grower out first time around. Absolutely screw them over. You know, you need to therefore be on top of your game in terms of, you know, leaf stripping and yeah, something like yes, no, you know, the game's out. Well, if you're not going to, and not everybody does, then you really need to crank up the airflow as well, because you're gonna have a very dense canopy.
Yeah, my second indoor grow, I ended up getting PM. You don't want that to happen.
And if you have a constant airflow of around 2 meters a second speed over your plants as a minimum, you reduce the chances of things like powdery mildew and all these other fungal spores from settling by up to 80%. And that's just by having airflow. I mean, that's like tick. I've only got 20% of this shit to deal with now. So that makes a significant difference, especially in a bigger space as well, where you can, you know, do it over a long distance, whatever. But that's just the important thing to remember, that the spores just don't have the ability to settle in that strength of airflow. At the same time, be careful you don't burn them. So there's the catch.
Yeah, there's definitely a sweet point. I've had a fan that's way too big put in there, have it go, and then like within a day, like yeah, not even a full 24 hours, I'm already seeing leaf tip damage just from the wind itself. So yeah, you could totally harm your plant and make it a detrimental thing. So make sure you don't overclock too much. I'm glad I overclocked with my exhaust because it got everything done. I think Chasmanian Devil actually put up a question way earlier and we kind of just glossed over it. But I want to get to it. He was saying, are there any negatives to running a negative pressure system? So with the exhaust constantly going, the only negative I've seen is just because I use a fabric pot, I use a large 65-gallon fabric pot, keep this in mind.
Okay, so you mean
it dries everything out a little faster. So that's the only negative I see.
Okay, so you mean negative pressure, you mean, sorry to interrupt, you mean negative pressure is in the passive intake and it's constantly sucking in what everybody in a red state has to do, or a prohibition area has to do to keep the smell down, because you don't want be blowing shit out. You want everything coming in and everything going out, going through the carbon filter.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's how I have mine.
No, so I mean, I think that's
That is
pretty
exactly
much
what I do.
that's pretty much the standard norm. It blew me away going to a spot in Colorado. And it's like, mate, as I'm walking, like, I'm used to having to like pull on the door to get it open, and this was like, to get blown across the room trying to hold it, like to push the door closed again. It's like, what the fuck? But yeah, well, you keep the bugs out. They go like, yeah, that's just it. Yeah, it's like it helps to keep the bugs out. It's complete reverse. So yeah,
Guess it depends what's your pressure. Is it heat or is it bugs or is it? Yeah. So what's your problem? Yeah, no, my bad.
I mean, the only real dilemma you have there is if you in a tent, you gotta be careful because, like as Shubi's had that problem, and it happens. You accidentally zip it closed, and you crank the fan on, and the intake's blocked or something, and it'll just go. You realize, oh wow, 1 atmosphere pressure. That's pretty impressive stuff. Look at that! You can fit an entire 10 by 10 into a 1 by 1 space, plants and everything. So yeah. Canvas for how often do you try and exchange? I think the optimal is like constant. You never really want it to stop, but that's never going to be the case. I mean, I know mystery grow, especially in the winter when it's getting cooler, and the problem then is trying to keep it warm. Constantly dumping the air results in it getting too cold. So then it sort of clicks in and out. Will only dump air when it gets too warm, and that can be anything from every 30 seconds on and off to, half hour, minutes, or whatever. But otherwise, yeah, keeping it constantly going is, it's just you again, it's they're weighing the whole thing up. You've got to be careful. You don't want to be constantly dumping, and you're dumping all this warm air and cooling
It's
the
either
plants.
that or use a smaller or less powerful fan that might give it a small trickle of constant air, and that way you're still getting air exchange. Your plants are still getting the CO2 that they need, or whatever, the ambient CO2, like bare minimum, which is more than enough.
I know the fan they use, that thing, just the thing turning on dumps the air from the room. Run for 30 seconds. Wow, why not? Feel good. But yeah, definitely it's one of those where it's, if you can get like one of those EC fans that you can spin all the way down to like 10%, just so it's a constant trickle, just pulling air through, then yeah. I mean, it's dumping the air out. The other thing, you can have something blowing air in, and then because that's pushing fresh air in. It's just not. Yeah, I'm not talking like just a small little PC fan. It's just blowing fresh air in all the time. It's not a huge amount.
Exactly.
It doesn't create this massive positive pressure. It's just keeping some fresh air blowing in all the time. And then when the main fan kicks in, it just sucks straight through that PC fan without a problem.
Yeah, that's the part we didn't really talk about, was like, do you use an Inkbird, or like AC Infinity has its own humidistat, like or like your system you can use a controller with. What control, like that's a whole other thing, is like, using that a controller, an Inkbird, that shit can help you a ton, to be dumping air whenever you reach either humidity parameters or temperature parameters.
Yeah, no, precisely. I mean, and that's just it. When you start, there's ways of doing it. And yes, the peel grow systems, I mean, we've got a way of controlling things. It's one of those hot topics that I think Keith's discovered this, like I did. Be careful what you say in public. It'll come back and haunt you. I'm already thinking maybe I'll do the control units, but do them as kits and something like that, and figure out some way of being able to get them into people's hands. But the idea is,
point of
even
measuring your thing if it doesn't do anything about it, so you get an alert, you can go home and fix it, but it's even nicer if the system can maintain itself.
It gives you an alert and tells you, hey, things are now balanced because it was triggered. This was triggered in the control system.
Yeah. I thought the idea of measuring your thing was bragging rights, but hang on. Yeah, but there's all sorts of different there's what we can do, but there's other solutions that are out there that you can do. If you look into things like if this, then that as a in between solution, because you'll find that a lot of these devices can talk to the if this, then that service, and then you can make them talk to each other via the if this, then that service. You can start to create these little scripts. Other option I highly recommend people get into if you're slightly curious and you've got a little bit of curiosity and you want to play around with stuff, get into things like Arduino, Raspberry Pi. You can then play around with all of these sensors and control stuff yourself. It's a hell of a lot of fun when you can start to play around with the real world and interact with it.
But what about those of us who are morons, Pete? Speaking as a moron myself.
Yeah. Got a checkbook? Then come and speak to me.
Yeah, right.
I help separate morons from their money.
I mean, and that really seems like the next evolution of any kind of measuring device is having it able to switch on or off the remedy to the thing which it is measuring.
But no, that's precisely it's that interaction. As I said, we've got it. I do it. I mean, I use one. The Mystery Grower uses one. There's a few people that have had them, but they're definitely.
But you're not going to tell us about how to get one. Is that
I mean, you can DM me on at PL Grow Systems and we can talk.
All right.
I mean, at the moment, it really is a case of they'd have to be made up as a kit.
Slide into the DMs.
Build it and use it at your own risk. I think that's the bit that makes me nervous about the whole thing is, it's all good and well to measure environmental stuff. That I have no problem with. But it's when you're suddenly controlling it for somebody else. It's like, just to me, it's where I get, I had spent too many years in IT to have that degree of confidence in IT. Even though I wrote it myself and I use one that's been fine for, touch wood, 5 years or whatever. Yeah, actually, you can just see Murphy and Sod sitting there going, "Wait, numbers up. Fancy a double date."
You didn't need that house you had.
Just to show you just how fucking down the techie rabbit hole I am. Butter Boy's comment about being a direct descendant of King Burgundy, Battlefield 1080. I read Battlefield and 1080 and naturally assumed Battlefield the game, NVIDIA 1080 the graphics card.
Pete, you nerd.
Yeah, it's terrible.
God,
absolutely terrible.
I think we're all related to somebody from 1080. Like, it's when you go back that far, you're like, genetically, we're all the same. Like, we're probably all related to that same guy from way back then because there just weren't that many people on the planet. My grandparents used to say, we were descendants from John Alden from the Mayflower. And then, my science professor was like, yeah, so were the rest of us.
Great grandmother was a slag. Great grandmother liked cock. That's why we're all related.
Yo, mama.
At one point, all of our mothers liked cock.
Yeah. At first. Oh dear. Alrighty then. Well, I tell you what, it draws us up to almost an hour and a half. It's been a good chat. I think we're certainly covered some interesting something. Hopefully, some tips and tricks there for people who are dealing with the temperature at the moment. I'm sitting here and sweating away because all the windows closed. Beating the back of the device. There we go. It's heat, just like the plants. So
right?
yeah,
It makes it easier to deal with.
On that note, where can everybody find everyone here? Let's start with you, Shipwreck. Where can everybody find you, buddy?
You can find me on Instagram if you want to check me out, shipwreck_420. Thank you, Pete.
No worries,
Sure.
buddy. Thanks for showing up. Great to have you on. JMF, where can we find you, sir?
You can find me usually hanging out here with you reprobates or hanging out with the other reprobates in the neighborhood grows. Hang us out there and catch us on Monday afternoons. So, 7 p.m. Pacific, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Just hit me on IG if I can be helpful with anyone, any food stuff. I'm always about to get in the kitchen to make some dinner. I'm always fermenting something or making something or brewing something. So, holler at me, Genetic Memory Farms on IG if I can be helpful. And we'll see you Monday in the neighborhood if you want to come by, guys.
Yeah. Excellent.
And thank you, Pete.
My pleasure, man. My pleasure. Once again, thank you for stopping by and joining us on the show. Raptor buddy, where can everybody find you? Current 7 p.m. Eastern time. Sorry.
Yeah,
Just kidding.
No worries. You can find me at Raptor Grow, all one word, all lowercase, at Raptor Grow Instagram. And you can also find me here with everyone 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 4 Eastern, 9 UK. And you can also find me on the Neighborhood Grow Show. That's 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 7 Eastern, and 12 UK. So yeah, hope to see you all there. We had a very fun, our last episode was great. We had a lot of fun with Mr. Trees. We got to interview him and learn a lot there. So please check out that episode if you haven't already. Yeah. Hope to see you all on Monday though.
Yeah, no, that sounds good.
If it's not too late for the UK, if you're all up, you're welcome to come.
Yeah. And we'll see how it goes. With these warmer temperatures, you'll probably find quite a few people still be up.
Yeah. We'll see
warmer
how
temperatures. I mean, it's only 25 degrees.
Well, from here on out, it's just going to get warmer. So the summer solstice is coming closer and closer. Yeah. I've actually considered myself more born in the summer, but it's in reality just late. I'm born in late spring, so pretty fun.
I used to be born in the summer when I was in the southern hemisphere. Not anymore. It's fucking ridiculous. Middle of bloody winter now. Can't take it. And hey, Chris, buddy, Ganja Grower, where can we find you, sir?
Cheers, Pete. Yeah, Ganja Grower on Instagram. And I'd like to shout out Raptor also. It was his birthday. I know it kind of suddenly, but so he's into his 30s, baby. So happy birthday, Raptor. But thanks, Pete.
Yeah, 31. Yep.
Go on, 31 rips.
Great.
Come on, quick.
I've been doing it throughout the show, to be quite honest.
I don't know. We could go back to tape, but I think what we just need is just quick 31 rips, buddy. We'll wait. We'll watch.
All right, there was one.
It can't kill you, but hey, it's worth a try.
Oh, the after show is going to be a while, so you got time.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. I'm working on.
You want to see Raptor get blasted? Come join the after show.
Yeah,
there you go.
Actually, the after
There
show
you
is
go.
31 spankings. So if anyone's up for
get
the
people-
OnlyFans version,
Yeah. Once again, you're more than welcome to jump into the after
That's
show. I've
Patreon.
posted it enough time there. So cool. You can always find me at Operation Grow 2019 on Instagram, also at PL Grow Systems on Instagram, and plgrow.systems, the website. And thank you all for tuning in. We shall catch you all next week. Stay safe. Keep well.
Here goes two.